Hey there, friends. It's Bill MacDonald, the reading and writing doctor, and I want to ask you a question before we start. Have you ever heard of the expression think outside the box? Well, the main reason that most of the ninth graders got the question that we're going to look at today wrong was because all they did was think, look, and read inside the box. So I'm going to show you a very specific strategy that will help your kids remember to rewind before the text that's being asked about, and or to fast forward beyond it so that we can see what's outside the box. Think and read outside the box. Now, before we get started, I want you to look behind me at that lighthouse. A lighthouse is meant to guide ships into a harbor or a bay on dark, stormy nights, provide a light to give them a sense of direction and hope, basically, that they're going to make it to their destination. So the question that your ninth graders were asked, and it goes for any box question or sentence because they asked your students to read an entire paragraph, is make sure you remember to rewind, and this time I'll do it like a truck, beep, 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 and fast forward so that we can check before the part in the box they're asking about, to the paragraph before if there is one, or to the paragraph after or a few sentences after, until we find the most logical answer that we can infer, read between the lines. So the question said, why does Addie compare the settlement home, that's the subject, this what the paragraph is talking about. This home, settlement comes from the word settle, so people settle there, to a lantern in the paragraph. So I want to make sure I don't say it. It says it had electricity in all of the rooms. So at night it lit up the street like a lantern. Because of the word like or as, that makes it a simile. So a settlement home is similar to a lantern in the same way that a lighthouse is a light in the darkness for boats and ships needing guidance, direction, and hope. So let's take a look and see, why did half of the students, more than half of the students, have a hard time with this question? Well, first of all, it says to read paragraph one. Paragraph one is entirely there. And then it asks you a question. It says, why does Addie compare the settlement home to a lantern in the paragraph? So I'm going to use this red monkey that looks like an S as the question sentence. This settlement house that you can see on the top there looks like a lantern. Now, it is important to realize there's some extra words. At night is not part of the question, and it lights up the street like a lantern. It's not lighting up the house. So that's an important thing to remember. So let's rewind. And I want you to look at my redevising graphic organizer. The box sentence, question number 22 says, why does the settlement home look like a lantern in paragraph 1? So there's the box question, the sentence. And so I have where the fingernail goes, a 1 for paragraph 1. And if you think of it this way, what is the sentence? That the settlement house is like a lantern. But more importantly, it lights up the street at night like a lantern. So when you look at the bottom of my graphic organizer, for the hand, you see that everything in a passage ties together. And so any time that we have questions about something, we want to check the specific supporting sentences. And so the color red will represent supporting, that we're going to call that the one in the middle. And I told you that you can go to Dollar Tree and get these. And so if we only read the rest of paragraph 1, where I'm rewinding within the paragraph because it was the last sentence of the paragraph, or I read before, well, there was no before, there's no paragraph 0. All there is a title, and it says the Boston Girl. So since the Boston Girl is not really about the subject or the topic of paragraph 1, it's more about the house, that's not going to help me. But let's go ahead and take a look. And I'm going to be doing this in the corner so you can see the first, if I read from one sentence back, it had electricity in all the rooms. So at night, that part was important because it's before the part that's being asked about. Is that positive or negative? Well, most houses have electricity. So for now, we're going to call that neutral. It's not positive or negative. It was new with yellow bricks instead of red. Okay, back up one more. That's not really a positive or a negative things. I've seen houses with lots of different colored bricks. So let's look a little bit earlier. The settlement had said it was a 4-story building that stood out from everything else in the neighborhood. So it stands out. Well, apparently, if it's a 4-story building, it's bigger and it stands out. It doesn't say whether it stands out in a positive way or a negative way. So that's what I have before. And so I don't really have enough information to find out why she compares it to a lantern that at night will light up the street. So I'm going to have to fast forward to paragraph 2, and I look at paragraph 2, and so instead of using yellow for going backwards, we'll use the green for going forward. It says that it's busy all day, and so it might not come out green because of my green screen behind me, but no, that's a green monkey right there. Busy all day. Why? That doesn't really help me for now because we're looking for why it's so valuable at night. There's a nursery for mothers. Okay, that's during the day. That part doesn't help me. There's a wood shop for boys. So busy all day because there's a nursery for mothers, there's a wood shop for boys, and we'll say that there's an English class for immigrants. And the last part that I want to talk about, this last little green one in paragraph 2, when I see the connection between the paragraphs, when I link them, sort of like a web, if you think of Aquaman, who has little webs between his fingers, sort of like a duck does between its feet. This part's very important because it says that there's women asking for food. So when I show you that part, it's very important that you see after dark, very important, at night, women would come to ask for food and coal so their children wouldn't starve or freeze. The neighborhood was that poor. So if I had one more green monkey, I would put that one as well. But those last two details, the star, the reason that they want the house to have electricity in all the rooms so that it lights up the street like a lantern, is so that at night, after dark, the women who are very cold at their homes and hungry could come and ask for food. So if you were to do an open-ended, you would say it's so that it was like a beacon, it was like a lighthouse that allowed people to find their way in the darkness of the night. People probably couldn't even afford flashlights or lanterns of their own, so they would have to be walking in the dark. And so it wasn't until you fast forwarded until the end of the second paragraph where you kind of make a connection. Why do you think? So if that's the cause, that could be the effect. Because the rooms are all lit at night like that, it lights up the street, causing all of the women after dark to be able to come and ask for food, find their way over there for shelter. So let's see which answer best fits what we're going to try and infer. To exaggerate the judgmental attitudes of those who run the house. Nowhere, anywhere in finger 1 or 2, paragraph 1 or 2, did we have any judgmental attitudes. And so it's important that if you're going to be eliminating judgmental, is a negative thing, comes from the root word judge and judgment. To exaggerate means to hyperbolize, to make it even worse than it already is. Well, there was no judgmental attitude. You could tell in paragraph 2, all of those green monkeys, those green sentences, were helping people. So it was the opposite. So there was nothing but positivity coming from the actions of the people who lived in the house. Letter G, only 7%, to indicate that the community surrounding the house takes its services for granted. When you take anything for granted, it means that you don't appreciate. It didn't say anything about how these people felt, their feelings and emotions, or what they thought, their point of view, their thoughts and opinions. So because nothing was mentioned about the voice of the characters, how they felt about what was happening for them at this settlement house, I can't pick that one. But 41% of your students in Texas said that it was to help the reader visualize the beautiful architecture of the house. Well, we said that a 4-story building, there's nothing, they didn't say anything beautiful, there's nothing positive or negative there. it's got yellow bricks. That's just descriptive. There's nothing positive. There's electricity in the rooms. Well, there's nothing positive or negative. It doesn't talk that. That's not the beautiful architecture. The only reason they put that was so that in paragraph 2, you could lead to this answer here to symbolize the house as a. So we have like a over here and as a comforting place. So comfort, I have a little heart drawn around it. It's a place for comfort in a poverty-stricken neighborhood. Poverty, when you look it up, and stricken means poor. How can you tell that the people are poor? Because they're teaching them trades. They're having to have basically free daycare so that the people, the moms can and dads can go work. But most importantly, that most important detail was that so that they could get food to not starve and coal to not freeze. You can infer, and you'll have to infer that, but unless you do like I'm showing with you here, read outside the box to the end of the second paragraph, you'll never get to that part for the real reason that they light that house up so much at night. There's nothing for those 40%, 41, there's nothing beautiful about the architecture. So when you look up architecture, the way that something's made, they weren't trying to show off. They weren't trying to just be rich and be fancy and stand out in that way. They only wanted to stand out like a lighthouse, like a lantern, so that the people who were poor could be able to see that house in the distance and be able to walk over there in complete darkness and have their needs met. So connecting to real life, a lot of people have lost their jobs during COVID, post-COVID, and are doing very poorly. And so I would suggest, to make a real world connection, how can your classroom be like a lantern or a lighthouse to people in your classroom who have needs, people at your school, in the neighborhoods? Everybody knows of somebody who's struggling in some way or another. And so to make a real life connection to this passage, Boston Girl, I want you to change the name to your city, your school district, and your classroom to say, how can we be the last school district I taught for, the FAR San Juan Alamo students. Every time that there was a hurricane, we would have a mock hurricane in our classroom, pretend like there was one coming the next day. We would tape up all of our windows. We would decide which canned food we were going to bring. We would bring a rope and decide if we had to go outside, what could we wear to protect ourselves from the weather. And so all day long, that next day, we would be inside during the hurricane, and I would say, okay, exactly this time in the morning, the power is going to go off. So I would turn off the electricity and the air conditioning, let's say at 10:30 a.m. So I told the students, make sure you bring your flashlights, maybe a hat with a little lantern on top, a little spotlight, no matches with actual lanterns. Some kids got battery operated lanterns, and we would eat there in the classroom. If we had to go to the restroom, I borrowed this long rope from our coach at the school that they used to play tug of war. And I said, when we go to the restroom, we're going to go together as a class so that no one gets left behind in the classroom in case something happens to the structure of our building, our home. And so the other thing that I borrowed from our coach was one of those huge fans, because we used to have a gym that had no air con. And so that big fan would just kind of circulate air. And so I told one of my students privately, I said, hey, when you pass that fan, I want you to let go of the rope and pretend like you're rolling down the road, getting blown away by the 100-mile-an-hour winds as we're working our way to the restroom. And he would be like, sir, help me. I'm blowing away. I'm going to die. And I would tell the class, hang on. Don't anyone let go. Get against the wall. And I would tell him, you know, if the wind was coming from the east, then we would get on the west side of the hallway. If the wind was coming from the west, then we would get on the wind was coming from the west. We would get on the east side of the building slash hallway so that the wind would hopefully pass over us. And so what would happen was once the hurricane was over and the power came back, the kids got to experience a little bit of what it was like to be in a real hurricane. And then we would have a canned food and clothing drive for that next 2 or 3 weeks to help the communities around Texas or Louisiana, any of the states that were experiencing hurricanes. And over the last couple of years, there's been several. And so I think whenever you can go beyond the passage and see how this could make a life connection, it's a great extension where we can not be just thinking of ourselves, but like the people in the passage Boston Girl, where we help those in need. So just a couple ideas for you both on life and living and on practical strategies using monkeys to sometimes think outside the box, because paragraph 1 did not have the answer by itself. We had to fast forward to paragraph 2 to find that specific supporting sentence about the women who would go for food and coal so they wouldn't die of hunger and starvation. So hope you liked the video, hope you liked the idea. May you be a lighthouse or a lantern for even one person in your life. Goodbye and God bless.